On today's episode of Locked On Wild, a familiar face in a new place.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I'll admit it. I've got a little bit of a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I was just playing for a while before we started recording. It's a great mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us to discuss the news that is going to drop at some point. It's basically... It's pretty well known now that Danila Yurov is going to sign for another year in the KHL. So we'll react to that. We'll also react to former Wild head coach Dean Evason being in the mix in Ottawa and a guarantee, essentially, that Declan Chisholm will be re-signed to an extension here this offseason. So we'll talk about that today as well. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and joined, as mentioned, by Alex Micheletti after a full day of playoff hockey on Sunday. And Alex, this is the part of the offseason that I like because we start to get little trickles of information. And so then we get the opportunity to break them down in full here for our Monday episode.
Yeah, it's great, and we'll have the lottery for next week too. So yeah, this is where it starts to get real interesting. So yeah, it's a fun time of the year, and the draft will be here before we know it too, and free agency. So it's just full steam ahead for all of us. So yeah, I'm excited, and it's been a heck of a start to the playoffs too in the rest of the league. So lots of fun here upcoming in May and June.
And we're getting to the point where teams are starting to drop out of the first round. The Washington Capitals were the first team to do so.
Ovechkin, no points.
Just crazy. Unbelievable show by no-show. I'll just say it. It was a no-show by Alex Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals with the series on the line. It was, ironically, it was close. It was 2-2 at one point, but then the Rangers just too much. And so they advance to round two. They'll likely take on the Carolina Hurricanes. That's going to be absurd.
One more thing, too. It's so absurd, I think, with the playoff injuries that guys play through. It's unbelievable. They said TJ Oshie played game 4 with a broken hand. Can you imagine any of us doing our regular jobs, and we just had that significant of an injury, and we just continued to play through? It's just insane.
Yeah,
especially when you're trying to hold a stick. I couldn't even imagine.
I was going to say I could try to do the rest of this podcast with a broken hand, but yeah, I'm just not even going to attempt to because it'd be impossible.
Right.
It'd be impossible to just try to navigate through with one hand. But, it's interesting because you see all of these playoff series, and I just continue to try to find little crumbs from these series that can relate to the Minnesota Wild. And
well, and another big thing that happened today, and it happened last night too. So Nashville and Vancouver were playing, and Nashville had that lead, and it would have been 2-2. Instead, Vancouver scores too late, gets to overtime. Now they're up 3-1. So that difference between a 2-2 and a 3-1 series is so huge.
Yeah, and how deflating for Nashville. You had It was just under 3 minutes to play, and you had a 2-goal lead. And not only that, you blow the 2-goal lead, but you get scored on immediately in overtime. Like
And,
that's a
Colton Sissons missing the empty net too, and it like Quinn Hughes was giving that to him too, like because you saw on the replay at first Quinn was like, "Oh shoot, game over, here you go." You know, he kind of made an attempt right like the last second, but it didn't affect the shot at all. But yeah, it was just like that's so backbreaking because he knew right when he missed that was going to haunt them some way, and then Quinn Hughes. The play he made to keep the puck in zone, and he broke Gus Nyquist's ankles on that play. That was unbelievable. And then Besser, what a story to get a hat trick. Yeah, that was pretty cool for the Burnsville kid.
Yeah, it was a fun game, fun weekend of hockey, and it extends beyond the Stanley Cup playoffs, which we'll continue to keep an eye on. It extends to the KHL playoffs because last week, Danila Yurov and his Metallurge team ended up winning the Gagarin Cup. So Danila Yurov, a KHL champion, and he's going to get he's absolutely good for him, good for the team. And he's going to get an opportunity to defend that because depending on where you look, some places it's been reported. Michael Russo said it's going to likely happen this week. Danila Yurov is going to go back to the KHL on a 1-year deal. He's going to get basically four times the amount of money that he got this past season. So that's a huge draw. It's more money than can even come close to being offered by the AHL at this point. And so we would all like to see him here.
Right.
But this was just, I think, always going to be the route that this ended up going. It just seemed like based on the roster construction that he was always going to go back to the KHL for one more year.
Right. And, one more year of the buyouts. We'll see. The team's going to be completely different once that happens. There's going to be a ton of money for them to use and play. And so, it gives them more flexibility for him to develop for one more year over there at least. And, we saw it took a lot longer to get Kirill here. So he's still so young, and, for him to win a championship at the age that he's at, that's going to, help him as he continues to grow as a player and get stronger. I think, that's a huge thing for him too, is he has the speed, but get even stronger as he grows into a man too. We got to remember this guy is still like just, getting out of his teenage years. So there's a lot of time for him to still, play in the NHL.
And, the interesting thing about this too is I'm going to be fascinated to see how this plays out next year, because the only reason that Murat was able to make his debut during the season was because the KHL team that he was on was
the
awful.
Worst. Right. He was the worst. He went from like the best to the worst.
Yeah. The only reason he was able to do it is because his team was done in the regular season. And it was like, the minute that this team is done, I'm out of here. Like, if Yurov's KHL team like goes on a deep postseason run again, and the Wild don't, you're not going to see Yurov at all next year. And then the assumption being that he just then the following season just is on the team to start the year, and you don't run into any situations of having to burn a year.
Right. Because that's always a mess.
Yeah. It feels like this is going to just be a clean swap for Marcus Johansson. Roster wise, look, we spent the whole season going by the numbers, criticizing, and just being done with having Marcus Johansson on the team until otherwise noted. He's going to be back on the team next season. Now, he'll be in a contract year. Denny pointed it out in the comments. He'll be on a contract year. So the hope is that his performance is better, but it's a
make or break it. He's 33, right? 33 or going to be 34. So that's, you're right at the age where a lot of guys, it's a different game. It seems like a lot of guys are retiring younger these days. I think maybe I don't know why that is trending, but it could be just the speed and
Yeah.
keeping up with the
General wear and tear
yeah,
too.
exactly. It seems like guys are getting a lot beat up a lot more. Heck, today we saw how many guys were getting hit in the face with the
Oh,
puck. Oh my goodness, it was crazy. Roman Yossi was like skating around and he didn't even realize his ear was like like almost coming off. It was crazy. And then we had a couple in the Winnipeg game too. It was just nuts. Guy went to the
unreal.
hospital.
Ugh,
Yeah, it's
yikes.
crazy.
I'm begging Bill Guerin, do not fall for it. Do not
Twice.
get duped into giving Marcus Johansson an extension regardless of his performance this upcoming season. I'm begging for that to not happen. Use the opportunity to just make the clean cut and give that roster spot to Danila Yurov a season from now.
Yeah, because Johansson wants to cash in one more time before and he's not going to want just a 1-year deal. He's going to want multi years, and
don't fall for it.
He's going to want another no move clause, but he probably won't get that anywhere else. So
no, they don't give those out anywhere else.
Right.
Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it.
Star Wars gift trap.
We move from that to interesting news out of Ottawa, who is starting to ramp up their head coaching search, and a familiar name popping up amongst the finalists. We'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. As the opening round of the Stanley Cup playoffs and the NBA playoffs continues, Major League Baseball is also underway. You can place your bet on every single game. And get this, right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. Whether you bet on the Minnesota Timberwolves to take care of business in round 2 after getting the brooms out against the Phoenix Suns, whether you are picking the Vegas Golden Knights to beat Dallas, Colorado to beat Winnipeg, whatever your choice, make sure that you make FanDuel your top choice. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode of Locked On Wild also brought to you by GameTime. As the weather gets nicer, as the rain leaves the area, you can start to get yourself in spring and summer mode by grabbing tickets to watch the Minnesota Twins play at Target Field, or round 2 tickets for the Minnesota Timberwolves against whoever they play, likely Denver, but we'll see. Folks, these tickets are going to be hot commodities, and GameTime is here to help make your ticket buying experience as stress-free as possible. Listen to these perks that GameTime offers you. They can offer you last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, comedy, theater, and more. You also get all-in pricing. Toggling this feature on shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You can also get flash deals and zone deals, plus seat views and their lowest price guarantee, all on an app that is incredibly secure and super easy to use. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Timberwolves and Locked On Vikings. Big weekend for both, as we had the NFL draft. So you can check in with Luke Braun to get the full lowdown on all the picks made by the Minnesota Vikings. You can also hear from Locked On Timberwolves. Ben Beacon will have you covered after the Timberwolves became, get this, the first team in Minnesota sports history to sweep a best-of-7 series. That is not a typo. That is not an error. The Minnesota Timberwolves are the first team in Minnesota sports history to sweep a best-of-7 series. So make sure to check out both of those shows. Brandon Warren at Locked On Twins. Twin season in full swing. Just make sure to put the full Locked On Sports Minnesota lineup in your rotation. We've got you covered every single day, even in the off season. Locked On, your team every day. All right, Alex, let's talk about the Ottawa Senators. Why are we talking about the Ottawa Senators, you may ask? Well, it turns out in their search to find their next head coach, a familiar name has popped in amongst the finalists for the Ottawa Senators job. The list, Craig Berube, Kyle McClelland, and Dean Evason. Alex, what do you think? Would Dean be a good fit for Ottawa, considering what they are and where they want to try to go?
I think so. I mean, he has the personality. He's a fiery coach. He's Canadian, and so I think he'd fit well into that market. They're they have some they have Brady Tkachuk there, who's he's kind of fiery too, and so I think he'd get along pretty well with Dean. And I think Dean deserves another chance. We hear all the time recycled coaches, but I think the goalies really failed him this season with the Wild. So I think he deserves another chance to go out on a high note in this league. And so, I think it would be a perfect fit.
And it's interesting too, because Dean he's been a coach for a long time, but the Wild was his first real shot at being a head coach. Like, he's been an assistant a bunch. He was an assistant for Bruce Boudreau here. And so it's a little different with him. Like, Craig Berube's been around forever. And if I'm being honest, I'm sure Berube is doing the interview to kind of keep himself in the
I think when he's been on TNT, he's been great too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he should get into that, but
it just feels like where Berube is at, it feels like too big of a project for where he's currently at. Like, you add a guy like Craig Berube in if your team is pretty well set and you just need a guy like
it's a cup winner,
I could see a team like the Los Angeles Kings maybe going that route if they don't go with their interim guy. That type of a team. Ottawa's not like one player away.
No,
they have a bunch of young players.
They have no goalie. That's the problem.
Goalie.
When you don't have a goalie, you aren't getting anywhere. It doesn't matter how much, how many Tim Stutzels you have, and and Shane Pintos, Brady Tkachuks, Claude Giroux. I can't believe he's still going, but he's still going. So it's a guy that a really underrated guy is Drake Batherson too. That kid can play pretty well too. And Jake Sanderson, but they you need a goalie. They got to figure that out.
And they've got Stützle, they've got Ridley Gregg,
Empty
Shane
net.
Pinto.
Chaos. Yeah.
They've got Claude.
Dakota.
I'm looking at centers for a reason.
Oh,
because what have we always said when Dean Evason made his return? If he gets the job, Bill Guerin's first call should be to congratulate Dean on on getting the gig, and then saying, "I found your son wandering around aimlessly on the ice. Let's get you guys reunited. Well, just give us a late round draft pick, and let's just make this happen." Because basically, like, the reason that I think this makes sense is just because the way that the season ended, and Locked On Senators was all over this all season. The way the season ended, like, it just it's a team that needs kind of a kick in the rear end.
Yeah.
And he, I think, would be able to do that most amongst the guys that are in the mix. Berube, it's just too big of a project, I think. McClellan's, I don't know. I feel like it's a perfect
It went
fit.
haywire with the Kings. So.
Yeah, Dean's Canadian. Like, it feels like a perfect fit. And I think Brady Tkachuk would love having a coach like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially after a win, he's tossing coaches. Yeah.
Or he would hate it, and then he could be moved, maybe as part of a package to get Freddie Gaudreau reunited with his dad. He
saw the playbook with how his brother was treated there in Calgary, and they got him. The agent crafted a deal with the Panthers, and the rest is history. So it could be nice for Brady to get back into the United States. I think that the pressure on those Canadian teams, it's unbelievable to win. We saw the other night with Toronto, William Nylander screaming at Mitch Marner and telling them to stop crying.
Down.
Yeah, just the pressure up there it's truly unbelievable.
Let Craig Berube go there.
Right.
That would be.
Heck, I mean, there's no way. How do they run it back with Sheldon Keefe?
You can't. You can't at this point. You can't run it back with Sheldon Keefe. You can't run it back with the big three.
No. One of
those guys.
Somebody has to move.
I said this.
It could be the captain. Tavares. I mean,
somebody's going. I said this on Isha's show on the crossover with the Soda Pod. That is also dropping today. One of Matthews, Nylander, and Marner, 100% they're gone next season.
Yeah,
that team, that mix.
Matthews just signed his extension, so that's probably out of the mix. But Marner, it always seems like he's rumored. I mean, he did score after getting after that intermission where Biz just ripped him apart. So that was kind of funny. But he's been in the playoffs. He's been on the milk carton for sure.
Wow. Oh my God. Just looking at Toronto's situation,
it's a nightmare. And then you got Reeves on a 3-year.
God, people think the Wild have too many no moves. Listen to this: Matthews, Tavares, Marner, Nylander, Bertuzzi, all have Morgan Riley. Full no move on all of them. Modified no trade: Max Domi, David Kampf, Kelly Yarncroke. Ryan Reeves has a 35+ contract. Matty Nyes is on an entry level. Nicholas Robertson's on an entry level. TJ Brody has a modified no trade.
He's awful. Their
Jake
decor.
McCabe has a modified no trade. Joel Edmondson has a modified no trade. And then they got Jake Muzzin on injured reserve. He's got a modified no trade.
Now. Yeah.
John Klingberg has a modified no trade.
Hurt.
Matt Murray has a
hurt. Yeah, I mean, all these guys, their back end, they have, other than Morgan Riley, I mean, it's a bunch of 5-6 guys that are trying to play, in the top 4 too. That just, it was just unbelievable. And they traded one of their most promising defensemen, Rasmus Sandin, to Washington too. So that was a mistake. Just you aren't going to go far with the decor that they have.
No, you will not. They need to do something.
Can they find a goalie too? My goodness, Samsonov's, he's not it. Wool continues to get hurt. Matt Murray, is just a walking injury at this point in his career too.
Martin Jones is also on the roster.
Oh God, I forgot about that too. Just he's a nightmare too.
Yeah, one of those guys. Even though they have a lot of this locked into trade protection, one of those guys is going to be gone next year.
Right.
I will pretty much guarantee that. That'd be a spot probably for Craig Berube. It's a good roster. Dean would need to do a little work with Ottawa, but I think that's why they're looking at him. So we'll keep an eye out, because wherever Dean goes, the hope is that Freddie will follow.
Right.
So we'll
son, Finding Nemo, Finding Freddie.
We'll keep an eye on that. Speaking of, we will also keep an eye on a player that is likely going to be getting an extension, according to some recent rumblings. So we will talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff to this game. Like I said in the open, folks, I was literally playing Monopoly Go before we hit record while I was watching Kings Oilers. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. There is so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. I completed one of these sticker albums earlier today and ended up getting 1,000 spins. Are you kidding me? 1,000 spins that got me through the rest of the day. You can get cool new pieces to travel boards with. I'm using the Steam engine right now. Plus hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings and heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events that help you win big, with massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on the Google Play or App Store. Game on. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Seth Topol here with Alex Micheletti for a Micheletti Monday. And Alex will finish by talking about Declan Chisholm a little bit, because Michael Russo was asked, what are the odds that Declan Chisholm ends up getting re-signed? And if I can find the tweet, I will read it. But basically what he said was, it's a very high guarantee that that Chisholm gets re-signed. And honestly, did a lot of really good things down the stretch after being claimed as a young defenseman, still with room to grow. We're not saying that Chisholm at this point is like a finished product by any means, but he was very adept at running a power play. He finished with 8 points in 29 games down the stretch. And I think people are intrigued enough to want to see more. And it seems like the Wild are really satisfied and impressed with what Chisholm gave them down the stretch, considering what the other options were to fill out that third pairing.
Yeah, they really needed a puck moving defenseman. I mean, they were running out of options. You don't want John Merrill running a power play. So that was nice. Whatever scout saw, him up there in Manitoba playing for the Moose in the AHL. Thank God the Winnipeg Jets decided to keep Logan Stanley over him, who we saw against, Logan Stanley had to come into the lineup, because Brendan Dillon was out Did you see that cut that Brendan Dillon got?
That was,
oh my goodness.
I came very close to throwing up seeing that. I don't handle blood well, and seeing the cut, I was about
That's
did me
scary
in.
because I mean, when you're getting sliced by a skate, that
Yeah,
that's always nerve wracking, and that's something you have to get stopped right away, or else it's going to really be a scary issue. So glad he's okay, but that was nuts. But back to Chisholm. I mean, that's a tough move for him to not he was not playing in the NHL really, and they kind of just threw him right into the fire. And to run a power play too, it was new for him at the NHL level, and same thing with Brock Faber. They were both put in positions where they hadn't run a power play, and it both worked out smoothly. And with the unknowns of Jared Spurgeon, this is a nice cover to have for Chisholm too,
yes.
and play in special teams roles. I just don't think when depending on how Jared looks, I don't want him on the power play.
No,
So
and I
let him
think
focus on penalty kill.
I think Chisholm's performance on that power play unit was more impressive considering, like we talked about. I remember when the move was made to pull Brock Faber off of that top power play unit, because it seemed like his performance was starting to dip. Well, now we know why.
Yeah.
Playing with fractured ribs for the final 2 months of the season.
It's like the Oshie injury I was talking about. Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, just breathing has got to be difficult. I couldn't imagine trying to brace your body from checks and just skating around. It's Brock Faber's a special athlete.
As far as the contracts, I wonder if the Wild do something similar to what they gave John Merrill. 3 years, 1.2 per, because he's making $775 right now.
A bargain.
It's a modest bump. It's a young player who got an opportunity for the first time to really stick with an organization. I wonder if they do something like that.
They have the room to, and then if they trade Gus, that's another couple million that that can help them. And at this point, it seems the talk of rotating 3 goalies. I don't. It's like the saying, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you really have none. So just 3 makes zero sense. And if they do move Gus, you find a capable, guy that can play in the AHL. Look at Detroit. They had Alex Lyon in the hopper because they knew. I mean, Ville Husso just kind of got hurt and disappeared, and then was never heard from again, which is wild. Or you find like a James Reimer type, So those guys are out there. There's a lot of always journeymen that that you can have in Iowa in case Fleury gets hurt, or if disaster strikes with Wallstedt and he just can't handle being up full time. So that there's always ways to create space on the edges.
And your current free agent goalies at the end of this season, Capo Kakinen. But you've got backups. Pavel Francouz will be a free agent now. He obviously
just retired.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the list here. It's funny, a couple of former Wild goalies on this list. Cam Talbot, Capo Kakinen.
I don't want anything to do with Cam again.
No. Jeremy Swayman. There are names on here. There are guys that have plenty of experience. I mean, Scott Wedgwood.
Yeah,
he made $1 million.
Yeah, he was decent. That's a guy that could be a third in AHL. If he has to come up.
David Riddick started for the Kings last night against Edmonton in the postseason.
He tried. He did everything he could to keep them in it.
Yeah, there would be names, because I agree. Like, carrying three, just
no.
And if you even are considering carrying three goalies, that is, I think, enough of a reason to just like make a move. Like if you're going to even toy with that notion, why don't you just have Jesper up here all season?
Like Bill Guerin said, like he said it multiple times now, and you have to take him at his word. Wallstedt needs more games, and him playing in Iowa I don't think so. That's going to help him at this point.
Nope.
Iowa's a disaster right now. Either through they had a lot of guys that had to come up here, but I don't think it was good for him to go through all that losing this season. So I think him winning those couple games at the end of the year here, I think that gave him a lot of confidence, even though it was against the Blackhawks and San Jose.
You got to start somewhere.
You have to start somewhere, and it was better than only having one game and that Dallas disaster and having that in the back of his head all summer as he's training. He's going into the off season off a couple wins, off a good high.
Keith Petruzzelli is a goalie that's on the list. I just like the last name, Petruzzelli.
I think he played at Quinnipiac.
Eetu Mäkiniemi.
Is that the San Jose kid?
Yeah, he's in the Sharks system.
Yeah, it did not go well there, but yeah.
I'm just going off of names here. Olaf Lindblom, Rangers. Alice Stazika. There are names.
And there's teams out there that would take us. Mm-hmm. Philly would take us. San Jose.
Jersey.
You call New Jersey
1,000 times.
They've been through nightmares of their goalies. They need to find a guy, and Gus, would get another chance at trying to figure out if he can be a full-time number
Carolina.
one. Their goalies always get hurt. Yeah, it seems like, who knows with Freddie Anderson and
Boston if Swayman goes elsewhere.
Yeah. They tried to Olmark was going to go to LA. That was
they had
the
deal
him,
like
they had the deal
to.
Yeah. So at some point, I know those two get along, but I think, you would think that deep down that one of them or that they both would want a full slate instead of just flip-flopping every game. And Swayman, what he's doing he's shutting down the Leafs. I'm glad they stopped doing the rotating after Toronto, after Austin Matthews dominated Olmark.
Jim Montgomery was like,
it's like, all right, Swayman, back to you. Rest is history.
We're gonna just go to the one guy. So we'll see where Chisholm lands, but I would use that Merrill contract as a good modest raise,
right?
But still kind of.
And he's still young. There's plenty of time
24.
for him to,
So that's not a deal that will hurt you because he's young, because he's got room to grow, and so we'll see. We'll see what happens. But that will take care of today's episode of Locked On Wild. We appreciate everybody tuning in as always and making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to hit the like button on your way out and give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. All of those help get the show spread to other Wild fans so we can continue to grow the Locked On Wild community.
All over the world.
Yes, we are Locked On Wild worldwide. That doesn't roll off the tongue, but we'll workshop that. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.